A violent bark ripped through the frozen silence. Kane, the German shepherd, charged into the blizzard. No hesitation, no obedience. Daniel Brooks followed, flashlight shaking, instincts screaming. Then he saw her. A woman collapsed in the snow, blood soaking through her coat, steam rising in the cold air. This wasn't an accident. Someone was hunting her, and by the time Daniel lifted her into his arms, the war he thought he left behind had already found him again. Before we begin, if this story touches your heart, comment Amen, and please subscribe for more stories of courage, loyalty, and quiet heroes. Snow pressed down on the Wyoming mountains in heavy, wind-driven sheets, turning the forest into a white, soundless corridor where distance vanished and every step felt borrowed from the cold. Daniel Brooks had chosen this place because it asked nothing of him. The cabin sat alone on a ridge above a frozen creek, its logs dark with age, its roof groaning softly under the weight of winter. He was 38, tall and broad-shouldered, built the way men become after years of carrying armor and responsibility. His face was sharp and weathered, with a strong jaw and a nose that had been broken once and never quite forgiven the world for it. A short, uneven beard shadowed his cheeks, more neglect than style, threaded with early gray. His eyes were steel blue, steady and distant, the kind that missed very little but revealed almost nothing. Years in the teams had taught him control, over breath, over fear, over pain, but they had also taken something quieter from him. He smiled rarely now. He spoke even less. Daniel was on leave, officially. Unofficially, he was hiding. After back-to-back deployments that blurred deserts and cities into one long stretch of violence, he had walked away from the base with a duffel bag, a medical discharge still under review, and a silence inside him that no amount of sleep could fill. Wyoming offered distance. Snow erased tracks. Mountains didn't ask questions. The only living presence he allowed close was Kane. Kane was a 6-year-old German shepherd, large and powerfully built, with a classic black saddle over tan fur and a faint scar along his left flank where shrapnel had once kissed muscle. His ears stood erect even at rest, his posture alert without tension, a soldier who had learned when to be still. His eyes were dark brown and intelligent, always watching Daniel, always measuring the space between them. Kane had been trained as a military working dog, detection and protection, but more than that, he had been trained to read one man. He sensed changes in breathing, posture, heart rate. He knew the signs before Daniel did. In the quiet of the cabin, Kane was not a weapon. He was an anchor. That night, the storm arrived without ceremony. The wind rose, howling through the pines, rattling the windows as if testing their resolve. Daniel stood by the small kitchen counter, mug of black coffee cooling untouched in his hand, listening to the weather like a veteran listens to distant gunfire, evaluating, not reacting. Kane lay near the door, head on his paws, eyes half closed. Then his ears snapped upright, his head lifted, his body tensed. "What is it, boy?" Daniel asked quietly. Kane rose in one smooth motion and moved toward the door, nails clicking once against the wood. A low sound rolled from his chest. Not a growl of aggression, but warning. Then, without waiting for permission, Kane lunged forward as Daniel opened the door to check the storm. Snow and wind exploded inward, and Kane disappeared into the white. "Kane!" Daniel shouted, instinct cutting through thought. He grabbed his jacket, slammed his arm into the sleeve, and followed. Outside, the world had narrowed to a tunnel of wind and snow. Visibility was barely 20 feet. Daniel forced himself to breathe steadily, scanning the ground. Kane's tracks were already filling in, but years of training guided Daniel forward. He moved downhill toward the tree line, heart pounding not with fear, but with recognition. Kane did not break commands without reason. The dog stood near the edge of the dirt road, barking sharply now, urgent and insistent. Daniel pushed closer, boots sinking into drifts, and then he saw her. She lay on her side near the snowbank, half buried, dark hair plastered to her face with ice and blood. She was young, maybe late 20s, slender, with pale skin already turning an unhealthy gray-blue from the cold. Her jacket was thin, entirely wrong for the weather, and torn along the side. Blood soaked through the fabric, steaming faintly against the snow. Daniel dropped to his knees, fingers already searching for a pulse. Faint, rapid, dangerous. "Hey," he said softly, more to himself than to her. "Stay with me." Kane stood over them, body rigid, eyes sweeping the darkness beyond the road, placing himself between Daniel and whatever the storm might hide. Daniel checked his phone out of habit. No service. He looked up at the mountains, at the blowing snow that swallowed sound and light alike. Leaving her here was not an option. Not for the man he had been. Not for the man Kane still believed him to be. He slid his arms under her shoulders and legs. She was light, frighteningly so, and she didn't stir as he lifted her. Her head lolled against his chest, breath shallow and uneven. "I've got you," he murmured, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. The walk back to the cabin felt longer than the descent had been, each step a negotiation with the wind. Kane moved ahead, then back, checking Daniel's pace, checking her condition, guiding them through the white chaos like a living compass. When Daniel finally pushed the cabin door open and carried the woman inside, the storm slammed shut behind them. He laid her on the floor near the fireplace, heart hammering, already shifting into a mode he had hoped never to need again. This was supposed to be leave. Instead, with one decision, Daniel Brooks had crossed back into a world of blood, consequence, and responsibility, and somewhere deep inside, something long dormant had just opened its eyes. Daniel moved with a quiet urgency that surprised even himself. The cabin smelled of cold wood and smoke as he dragged the heavy wool rug closer to the fireplace and eased the woman onto it, careful to keep her spine aligned. He fed the fire with practiced efficiency, coaxing heat without smoke, then stripped off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. His forearms were scarred maps of old injuries, knife nicks, shrapnel kisses, the pale line of a surgical incision that had once nearly ended his career. His hands did not shake. They never did when something needed fixing. The woman's breathing was shallow, lips tinged blue, eyelashes crusted with ice. She was smaller up close, slender in a way that suggested long days without proper meals, her dark brown hair cut just below the jaw and tangled from the storm. Daniel pressed 2 fingers to her neck again. Still there, weak. "Stay with me," he said. Voice low, steady, the same tone he had used in dust and darkness half a world away. Kane hovered at the edge of the light, 6 years old, and solid as a statue, his chest rising in slow, controlled breaths. The dog's ears pivoted constantly, tracking the night beyond the walls, his body angled toward the door like a living barricade. Daniel peeled away wet layers, cutting fabric instead of tugging, exposing a deep gash along the woman's right side. The wound was ugly but clean-edged, torn rather than punctured. Not a bullet, he thought. The cold had slowed the bleeding, a cruel mercy. He cleaned it with warmed water, packed gauze, applied pressure, then wrapped her in blankets, leaving the wound accessible. He spoke to her as he worked, not because he expected answers, but because silence could be heavier than pain. "You're in Wyoming," he said. "You're safe for now." The word safe tasted unfamiliar. He said an IV line from an old field kit he'd never had the heart to throw away, fingers deft, eyes narrowed in concentration. The rhythm of care steadied him, pushed back the noise that lived behind his eyes. When he cut away the thin jacket to fully assess the injury, his blade snagged on something unnatural near the hem. He paused. Years of habit tightened his spine. He felt along the lining again, found a hard square sewn deliberately between layers. Daniel slit the stitches and drew it out into the lamplight. Black plastic, no bigger than a coin. A single green LED pulsed, patient and alive. A tracker. The room seemed to shrink. He wrapped the device in his palm, then set it on the table like it might bite. "No," he murmured, anger rising cold and precise. This wasn't exposure. This wasn't bad luck. Kane's growl deepened, a low vibration that traveled through the floorboards. The dog moved closer to Daniel, eyes flicking from the door to the windows, hackles lifting a fraction. Daniel met Kane's gaze and nodded once, an unspoken acknowledgement. "I know," he said. He checked his phone again. Still nothing. He moved the tracker to the far end of the cabin, away from the woman, and covered it with a metal pot without fully thinking why. Anything to muffle, to buy seconds. When he returned to the fire, the woman stirred. Her eyes opened, dark and glassy with fear, and she tried to sit up. Pain stole her breath. "Easy," Daniel said, one hand firm on her shoulder, grounding without restraint. "You're hurt." She swallowed, eyes darting to Kane. "Dog," she whispered, voice hoarse. "He won't hurt you," Daniel replied. Kane stepped back half a pace, lowered his head, offered stillness. The woman's gaze returned to Daniel, searching his face as if reading a map for exits. "Who are you?" "Daniel," he said. "I live here." A lie by omission. She closed her eyes, then opened them again. "I was running," she said, words uneven. "They—" Her voice broke. Daniel waited. He had learned the power of waiting. Outside, the wind clawed at the cabin, but inside the only sound was the fire and Kane's steady breathing. The woman's eyes filled, not with tears yet, but with a hard, exhausted resolve. "My name's Emily," she said. "Emily Carter." She looked down at the blankets, then back at Daniel. "They won't stop." Kane shifted, placing himself closer to her side, a quiet act of guardianship that surprised Daniel. He glanced at the tracker under the pot and felt the old instincts lock into place. Assess, adapt, protect. Whatever Emily Carter had brought to his door, it had teeth. And Daniel Brooks, on leave or not, was no longer alone in the storm. Daniel waited until the fire settled into a steady burn before asking anything more. He sat on the floor a few feet from Emily, back against the rough pine wall, boots planted, posture relaxed but ready. Kane lay between them, head up, eyes tracking every movement Emily made, not threatening, measuring. Emily watched the dog with wary respect, then shifted her gaze to Daniel. In the lamplight, her face showed its true lines. Exhaustion etched beneath the eyes, a bruise blooming along her jaw where something hard had struck her days ago. She was slim and of average height, shoulders narrow, hands calloused in the way of someone who typed long hours and forgot to eat. Her hair, dark brown with a natural wave, clung to her temples as the last of the ice melted. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but deliberate, as if she had rehearsed these words in her head and was finally choosing to let them out. "I didn't start as a whistleblower," she said. "I started as a data analyst." Daniel nodded once, encouraging without interrupting. Emily drew the blanket tighter around herself. "The company's name is North Valley Energy," she continued. "They build pipelines, storage sites, extraction facilities. On paper, everything was clean. That was my job. Verify the numbers, confirm compliance." She swallowed, eyes flicking to the fire. But the numbers didn't line up. Small anomalies at first. Soil samples flagged. Groundwater readings altered after submission. I thought it was error. Kane shifted closer, his flank brushing her leg, grounding her without pressure. Emily inhaled and went on. "I found internal backups they didn't know existed. Raw files, unfiltered. One site in particular, near a rural town in Colorado, had leakage levels that should have triggered an evacuation. They buried it. People got sick. Then they started dying." Daniel felt a familiar tightening behind his ribs, the quiet fury that came when harm was wrapped in paperwork. "You tried to report it," he said. It wasn't a question. "I tried internally first," Emily replied, a humorless smile touching her lips. "That was my mistake?" She hesitated, then reached slowly toward a small pack still strapped at her waist. Daniel watched her hands, alert but calm. She unzipped it and withdrew a rugged external hard drive, scuffed and scratched, the kind built to survive drops and weather. "Everything's here," she said. "Data dumps, emails, audio." I was supposed to hand it to a journalist named Mark Holloway. The name landed heavy. She closed her eyes. "We met at a pull-off outside the city. He showed up on time. I was late by 2 minutes." Her breath caught. They were already there. Daniel said nothing. He didn't need to. Emily's shoulders trembled once, then steadied. "A private security team," she whispered. "Not uniforms. Clean gear, efficient. One of them, mid-40s, tall, clean-shaven, eyes like glass, called Mark by name. Shot him once, calm, like it was paperwork." Kane's growl vibrated low, involuntary, as if reacting to the echo of violence in her voice. Emily flinched, then nodded at the dog. "I ran," she said. "I didn't even think. I ran with this and the clothes on my back." She looked at Daniel, eyes bright with unshed tears and something harder beneath. "They put the tracker on me when they grabbed me. I didn't know until tonight." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on knees. "They'll keep coming," he said. "For the drive. For you." "I know," Emily replied. "That's why I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Too many doors open the wrong way." She watched his face, gauging. "You've seen men like them," she added softly. Daniel met her gaze. The lamplight cut angles across his face, highlighting the old fracture in his nose, the scar near his left eyebrow from a door kicked in the wrong city years ago. "Yes," he said. "I have." Silence stretched, thick but not empty. Outside, the storm eased into a steady wind. Kane rose and circled once before settling closer to Emily's side, his body forming a quiet barrier. Daniel noticed and didn't correct him. He stood and crossed to the window, peering into the dark. Tracks already blurred by snow. Time was a currency they didn't have much of. "You did the right thing," Daniel said finally. Emily let out a breath she'd been holding since before the storm. "It doesn't feel like it." He turned back. "It rarely does at first." He glanced at the hard drive, then at the covered tracker on the table. Old instincts aligned, sharp and clear. "We'll get you through the night," he said. "Then we'll decide how to move." Emily nodded, trusting not because she wanted to, but because the alternative was unthinkable. Kane rested his chin on her knee, eyes soft now, vigilant. In the quiet cabin, truth settled like weight, and purpose followed close behind. Daniel tested the limits of the cabin one system at a time, not with panic, but with the methodical patience of a man who had learned that chaos rewarded the careless. He lifted the old landline receiver from its cradle and listened. Nothing. Not even static. He pressed the cell phone to his ear anyway, turned slowly in a full circle as if a signal might hide in corners. The screen glowed back at him with a flat refusal. No service. He lowered the phone and exhaled through his nose. "All right," he muttered, not to the devices but to himself. Emily watched from the floor near the fire, wrapped in blankets, the hard drive cradled to her chest like something alive. Her eyes followed Daniel's movements, sharp despite exhaustion. She was learning the shape of danger again. Recalibrating. Kane stood near the front window, body angled forward, ears rotating in tight, precise movements. The dog's posture had changed. This wasn't the loose vigilance of a guard dog in familiar territory. This was active assessment. Daniel pulled on his boots and jacket, grabbed a flashlight and opened the door just enough to slip into the night. Snow had eased into a light drift, but the wind carried sound farther now, deceptive in its calm. He moved along the cabin's exterior, beam low, tracing the ground. Kane paced just inside the threshold, whining softly, nails scraping once against the wood. "Stay," Daniel whispered. Kane froze, muscles tight, eyes never leaving his handler. Outside, Daniel followed the line of the wall toward the utility pole. The flashlight found what his instincts already suspected. The cable lay severed cleanly, copper exposed and bright against the snow. Not torn, not weathered. Cut. Daniel crouched, fingers hovering an inch from the damage. Precision. Someone had known exactly where to strike. He straightened slowly, scanning the tree line. "They're close," he murmured, more statement than fear. Back inside, he bolted the door and slid a chair beneath the handle. Kane immediately took position between Daniel and the door, chest broad, head low, a quiet wall of fur and bone. Emily noticed the shift. "What did you find?" she asked. Daniel met her gaze. "They killed the line," he said. "On purpose." She swallowed. "So they know where I am." "They know where we are," he corrected gently. The distinction mattered. He crossed the room and knelt, keeping his voice level. "These aren't corporate guards," he continued. "This is a contracted unit. Ex-military. Clean. They don't scare easily." Emily nodded once. "The man who shot Mark," she said. "He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He smiled." Kane's head snapped toward the window at a faint crunch of snow. His lips pulled back just enough to show teeth, not in threat, but in warning. Daniel rose, hand resting briefly on the dog's neck, feeling the tension coil beneath fur. "Easy," he breathed. He moved to the back of the cabin, checking windows, marking sight lines. The place was defensible in theory, thick logs, narrow approaches, but isolation cut both ways. No neighbors, no witnesses. Emily shifted, wincing as she adjusted her weight. "They'll come tonight," she said. Daniel didn't argue. He went to the small storage closet and pulled out a metal case wrapped in oilcloth. Inside lay gear he hadn't planned to touch again. A compact rifle broken down into components, magazines sealed against moisture, a satellite phone with a cracked antenna. His hands paused over the phone. He powered it on. The screen flickered, searched, then displayed a single line. Searching for network. It didn't connect. He shut it off, jaw tightening. Kane moved again, this time toward the side window, growl deepening, sustained. Daniel followed the dog's line of sight and caught a shape where shadow didn't belong, a dark silhouette near the tree line that shifted when the wind did not. He killed the light. The cabin fell into fire-lit gloom. "Get down," he whispered. Emily obeyed without question, sliding lower behind the couch. Daniel stayed standing, still as stone, counting seconds, listening for the sound beneath the wind. Footsteps never came. After a long minute, the shape retreated, swallowed by trees. Kane's growl faded to a low rumble. Daniel released a breath. "They're probing," he said quietly, "seeing how we react." Emily hugged the blankets tighter. "What do we do?" He looked at the cabin, at the cut line, at the dog who had never failed him. Old instincts settled, cold and clear. "We don't run blind," he said. "We buy time." He glanced at the tracker on the table, still covered. "And we make them work for every step." Kane returned to Emily's side, sitting close enough that his warmth seeped through the blankets. Outside, the forest waited, patient and watching. Daniel made the decision before dawn, when the storm thinned into a brittle, deceptive calm, the kind that fooled the careless. He stood by the window, studying the mountain's dark spine rising behind the cabin, its upper ridge scoured clean by wind. High ground, clearer sky. If there was any chance of reaching a satellite, it would be there. He turned to Emily. "We go up," he said. "Now, before they tighten the net." Emily's face drained of color, but she nodded. She was pale, wrapped in layers far too big for her slender frame, her movements stiff with pain. Still, her eyes held resolve. Kane sensed the shift immediately. The dog rose, tail low, muscles coiled, understanding danger as purpose. Daniel packed quickly, the hard drive sealed in a waterproof pouch, the satellite phone with its cracked antenna, minimal medical supplies. He slung a rifle across his back, movements economical, expression unreadable. Before opening the door, he knelt and met Kane's gaze. You warn, I move, he murmured. Kane's ears twitched. Agreement. Outside, the mountain breathed cold. Snow squeaked beneath boots as they moved uphill, cutting diagonally through trees to avoid silhouetting themselves against open slopes. Daniel set the pace slow and steady, compensating for Emily's injury. When she stumbled, he caught her by the elbow without breaking stride. I'm fine, she whispered through clenched teeth. I know, he replied, not slowing. Kane ranged ahead, then back, a gray shadow against white, pausing to scent the wind. Halfway up, the world opened. Trees thinned. Wind scoured the ridge, tearing snow into ghostly veils. Daniel crouched behind a boulder, pulling Emily close. He powered on the satellite phone. Searching. Searching. Kane froze, head snapping left. His hackles lifted. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He leaned into Daniel's leg, hard. Instinct screamed. Daniel twisted, dragging Emily down as the sound cracked through the air, not a gunshot, but the supersonic snap of a bullet passing too close to hear properly. Pain flared white-hot as something tore across Daniel's left shoulder. He grunted, momentum carrying him into the snow. Down! He hissed. Kane exploded into motion, barking sharp, frantic alarms, positioning himself between Daniel and the slope. Daniel pressed his teeth together, assessing. Blood soaked fast but shallow. A graze. He rolled, shielding the phone with his body. Emily, he said through pain. Now. She crawled beside him, hands shaking, eyes wide. The phone chirped. 1 bar, then 2. Connection. Daniel jammed the cable into the hard drive. Uploading. The screen blinked. Kane paced tight circles, barking whenever the wind shifted, tracking the sniper's invisible geometry. Daniel counted seconds. Pain throbbed, threatening to cloud focus. Come on, he muttered. Come on. Another crack split the air, this one farther. The shooter adjusted. Kane lunged, slamming into Daniel's chest, knocking him flat just as snow burst where his head had been. The dog's timing was brutal and perfect. Daniel gripped Kane's scruff, grounding himself. Good, he breathed. Good boy. The upload bar crawled. 50%. 60. Emily pressed herself low, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since childhood. The wind howled, masking movement. Another shot shattered rock inches from Daniel's boot. He shifted, using the boulder's angle, blood slick under his jacket. Almost, he said, voice ironed flat. 70, 80. Kane barked again, a warning that meant adjust now. Daniel rolled, dragging the phone with him. 90. The satellite icon flashed green. Upload complete. The screen went dark as the signal dropped. Daniel didn't wait. He grabbed Emily, hauled her to her feet. Move, he ordered. They descended hard and fast, sliding, half falling, Kane leading them into trees as bullets chewed air above the ridge. By the time they reached cover, Daniel's arm burned and his vision narrowed, but the weight on his chest eased. The data was gone. Somewhere beyond the mountain, someone had it, and the hunters would know. They reached the cabin just as the sky began to pale, the false calm before the next move. Daniel shoved the door shut with his shoulder, slid the bolt, and leaned for half a breath against the wall, pain pulsing hot through his left arm. Blood had soaked the sleeve, dark and sticky, but the graze had missed bone. He could work with that. Kane paced once, then planted himself at the center of the room, head high, chest forward, every sense sharpened. Emily collapsed behind the kitchen counter, clutching the blankets, eyes bright with shock and resolve. They'll come now, Daniel said quietly. We showed them the line. He moved fast, barricading windows with a heavy table and a bookcase, angling furniture to create dead space and narrow funnels. His face was set, jaw tight beneath the short beard, eyes clear with a focus he had tried to bury since leaving the teams. Kane tracked the perimeter by sound alone, growl rising and falling like a tide. Then the engines came. Low, disciplined, stopping short of the drive. Boots crunched snow in a measured cadence. Daniel handed Emily a pistol, checked the slide, pressed it into her trembling hands. "If they come through the back," he said, "you move to the pantry and stay low." She nodded, swallowing fear. A knock sounded at the door, polite and firm. Daniel ignored it. The knock came again, then the wood split under a heavy ram. The front door burst inward, and men poured through smoke and splinters, moving with practiced speed. The leader stepped last. He was in his mid-40s, tall, broad through the shoulders, clean-shaven with close-cropped dark hair and eyes too calm for the violence around him. His name was Victor Hale, a contractor who wore confidence like tailored cloth, rumored to have once worn a uniform he never talked about. Hale scanned the room once and smiled thinly. "Mr. Brooks," he said, voice even, "you've complicated my morning." Daniel fired. The first man fell. The second dove. Kane launched, a gray blur slamming into a third attacker, teeth finding forearm with a sound like tearing cloth. Daniel moved to left, drawing fire, bullets chewing the log wall where his head had been a heartbeat earlier. He shouted, a sharp command meant to pull them off Emily. It worked. Hale adjusted, sending 2 men after Daniel as he broke through the side door into the snow. Outside, the forest swallowed sound. Daniel ran hard, forcing distance, shoulder screaming. Kane stayed tight, then turned back at Daniel's whistle, intercepting a man who flanked too fast. A kick landed. Kane yelped and went down, ribs cracking under brutal force. Rage flashed bright and clean. Daniel doubled back, caught the flanker with a hard strike, then dragged the fight downhill, away from the cabin. Hale followed, controlled and patient, until Daniel feinted and closed, using terrain to negate numbers. The remaining men hesitated. Hale did not. He stepped in, efficient, ruthless. They traded blows, Daniel's injured arm a liability, Hale's precision relentless. Kane tried to rise, failed, then crawled, placing himself between Daniel and Hale, teeth bared despite pain. Hale raised his pistol. "Dog," he said flatly. Daniel moved, caught Hale's wrist, twisted. The pistol fell. They crashed together, breath and blood and snow. Daniel wrenched, used leverage instead of strength, and put Hale on his knees with a sharp, final lock. Hale looked up, surprised now, breath fogging. "Finish it," he said. Daniel stared at the man, saw the easy violence, the paperwork death. He thought of Emily, of the drive already gone, of Kane's broken ribs and unwavering loyalty. He struck once more, not to kill, but to end the fight, and bound Hale's hands with the zip ties stripped from a fallen pack. Sirens sounded far off, delayed by distance and weather, but real. Daniel turned, scooped Kane carefully, cradling the dog against his chest. Kane licked his chin, tail thumping weakly. "I've got you," Daniel whispered. Behind them, Hale sat in the snow, alive, breathing, proof that some lines still mattered. By the time the first federal vehicles climbed the mountain road, the sun had broken free of the clouds and laid a pale, forgiving light across the snow. Daniel sat on the cabin steps with his back against the post. Kane stretched carefully at his side, ribs bound tight, breath shallow but steady. The dog's coat was dulled with blood and ice, yet his eyes stayed locked on Daniel's face, tracking each breath, counting him back into the world. Emily stood a few steps away, wrapped in a borrowed parka, hair pulled into a rough knot at the nape of her neck, hands shaking now that the danger had finally found an edge. She watched the vehicles arrive not with relief alone, but with the wary attention of someone who had learned how quickly power could wear a badge. A tall woman stepped out of the lead SUV, early 40s, athletic build, dark hair braided neatly down her back. Her eyes were sharp and calm, the kind that measured before judging. "Agent Laura Bennett," she said, flashing credentials with practiced ease. "We received a verified data package via satellite uplink at 0602 hours. You must be Daniel Brooks." Daniel nodded, jaw tight, left arm bandaged and aching. "Emily Carter is the witness," he said. "Victor Hale is restrained downhill." Bennett's gaze flicked to the bound man, then back to Daniel, approval brief and professional. EMTs moved in, efficient and quiet, one kneeling beside Kane with gentle hands. The vet specialist, a gray-haired man with wire-frame glasses named Dr. Samuel Ortiz, spoke softly as he examined the dog. "You're a tough one," he murmured, voice kind, checking the wrap. "Cracked ribs, but clean. He'll heal." Kane's tail thumped once at Daniel's voice, and Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Inside the cabin, agents photographed the damage, collected weapons, logged the tracker Daniel had disabled. Emily handed over the hard drive's backup receipts, fingers steady now, her posture straightening as if truth itself had weight. Agent Bennett listened, asked careful questions, never rushing. "You did the right thing," she told Emily. "We'll take it from here." Hours later, as the mountain road cleared and the last siren faded, the cabin fell quiet again. Different now, not empty. Emily was escorted away under protection, turning once at the door. "You saved my life," she said, voice firm despite the tremor. Daniel shook his head. "You saved a lot of people," he replied. "Tell the truth. That's how this ends." Months passed. Snow retreated to the shadows and the creek ran clear, loud with melt. Spring returned to Wyoming with green insistence, pushing through what had seemed permanent. Kane healed, the stiffness leaving his gait until one morning he trotted the yard without favoring a side, grabbed a battered tennis ball from the porch and dropped it at Daniel's feet with an expression that was unmistakably pleased with himself. Daniel laughed then, quiet at first, surprised by the sound, picked up the ball and threw it toward the tree line. Kane chased, a gray streak against green, joy uncomplicated and complete. The news came by mail and then by call. Indictments filed, assets frozen, names read aloud in rooms Daniel would never enter. Emily was safe, her voice steady on the phone, gratitude measured and strong. Daniel made his own decision without ceremony. He signed the papers, folded the uniform, and stayed. The cabin no longer felt like a place to hide. It felt earned. He fixed the cut line himself, replaced broken boards, planted a small garden by the window. At dusk, he sat on the steps and watched the light fade, Kane leaning warm against his leg. The mountains didn't ask questions. They listened. And for the first time since he'd left the teams, Daniel Brooks didn't feel like he was surviving the quiet. He was living in it. In the end, this story reminds us that miracles don't always arrive as thunder from the sky. Sometimes they come quietly, through courage that refuses to die, through loyalty that stands firm in the darkest night, through a hand that chooses mercy over revenge. God often works not by removing the storm, but by placing strength, faith, and love inside us so we can walk through it. In our daily lives, when fear surrounds us and hope feels distant, remember, you are never truly alone. There is always a purpose watching over you, guiding you one step at a time. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment with your thoughts and subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith and courage. May God bless you, protect you, and bring peace to your home and your heart.